Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to have Matthew Monte as our feature. A couple of things from the write-up that I have here. His is a salient voice, recognized for its quality. He's a winner of the Blue Light Poetry Prize, for example. More recently, Matthew produced a collection, All Tomorrow's Train Rides. It's available from 16 Rivers Press, and it's described as an odyssey of reading and poetic memory. What begins as a single day in a worker's commute morphs into a Mobius loop of literary history and cultural consciousness. Where do we read and whom is a question that drives the nostalgia, dread, and humor of this collection. Riddled with geographic coordinates and commentary, this book of interdependent poems explores the idea of living in translation and fuses the formal aesthetics of cartography to our relationships with people, places, books, and the natural world. And then I found something by someone I know, Thea Matthews, who wrote of your work. Though through poetic cartography, Matthew Monte disembarks from a search of what ultimately is borderless, the topography of a land, a home extending from San Francisco to Tepeyac to down, places us in a position to feel the transit of time. We travel to where Monte coordinates the lingering as well as the vanishing points of a city. With lush lexicon, he fuses historical allusions with aspects of spirituality to expound upon what each train ride reveals. In turn, around the next bend, we keep coming back. She says this is a ride to catch.
All Tomorrow's Train Rides, Part 1. Out of the wintering wet and underway, turning out of the Caltrain yard, I assume a commuter's mudra. Right hand on the coffee, left thumb in last night's dog-eared page, our pilgrimage route to Friday. Window seat, threadbare zafu of 10,000 contemplations, I flood and filter the dawning land with what remains and what has disappeared, passing through all tomorrow's train rides. San Francisco, I've slipped from your zazen. Dark robes, the patchwork of city blocks, forever unraveling. And I get what you're saying about impermanence, but I haven't sat nearly long enough to be at peace with our frayed ambitions, with the wrecking ball economy south of Market, with the raised scar of Embarcadero Freeway, removed but resident in fading celluloid memory. I haven't sat nearly long enough to be at peace with the blue glass high-rising out of squatter camps by the freeway on-ramp, where the 99% shake fists and rattle cups at the anointed remainder, today's dichotomy, so say, our city's free newspaper and its paid-for sister, afterthoughts carpeting the aisle for a fresh-faced conductor in his training day blues, ambling up the car, flashing a smile and a Mets tattoo. Graffiti glares from all sides, simple as piss, marking one's territory, and sometimes, like now, the distant cactus of Tepeyac. Juan Diego on painted knees in the hills, south of that ugly line in the sand and fading into the crumbling wall of an abandoned mechanics bay. Witness to urban renewal, the new decay. I am not here, I who am your mother. Surrounded by a sea of fenced-in concrete, they say he's up for sainthood as we slow for Bayshore. Our nostalgists dream that antiseismic San Francisco was its golden age. But I finished reading McTeague long before the solstice, just to put that awful story behind me. Is it Tuesday? I look up and here's McTeague in the opposite seat, grizzled and whiskey drunk from last night, a slur of hair combed back from a red face, blue-veined and porous, more florid than his faded aloha shirt. Thrift store dungarees and hobnailed boots. A fist of belt buckle grips his sagging reveries. Pulling into San Bruno, I'm sure he's going to get off, but cannot rise. Only raises a hand to his rugged cough and SFO across the way, where planes bend away to cruel memory. torn in two by story, destroyed by every page. I'm not what I used to be. McTeague and me chained to one another, and the earth I see. This is about a commute that took place even before that on a bus. And it's called $2.75 worth. 2 quarters, 9 dimes off the dresser, and I will walk before I spend my lucky $2 bill. So sweep a pound of nickels off the nightstand, check jean pockets, lint, and wait, yes, another quarter makes bus fare. My girl, her sleeping mouth an O of wonder. Her lips gather around my own, parting into the wet. Sunday 6 a.m. between the rain's hush. Hush of our bedroom follows onto California Street, where its almost empty, long, rolling view sees the wet bus to my corner. Climb on with dishwashers and doormen headed for hotels. We erratic and empireless citizens whisper butchered Cantonese English greetings, find our seats beside electric hum of hills beyond the steamed glass, passage of gardens clinging to hill and trellis, suspended from cables, dripping neighborhoods, still asleep as we head to our weekend jobs. I'm going to read one poem from my very first collection, which is called The Case of the Six-Sided Dream, which, by the way, when it was released, I had the great pleasure of reading at Sacred Grounds when Thea was the featured reader. And it was on Halloween night, and it was lovely. Anyways, this poem is called Perfect Lunch Number 2. And I once had a job as a copywriter. Before I got fired from that job, the best part of that job was lunch. So the hours before and after lunch were agonizing, but I really liked lunch, and this poem, I hope, tells you why. Perfect Lunch Number 2. I lean into Vallejo Street and tell the tourists up top while I munch nasturtium flowers. It's named after Cesar, the poet, not the Spanish general in your Lonely Planet Death March. But I can see I've lost all credibility right here on the summer stairs, chewing my cud like a lazy ass Brahma. Zig and zag. And we were at Golden Boy for pizza squares and a Coke. Across the way, inquiring about a lap steel guitar in the window, I am handed a bruised beauty that wails like 200 years worth. I cannot pay our way, not yet, my sweet. Espresso around the corner in a brown demitasse with matching saucer and the jukebox blaring bel canto to the curb. I drink and leave my empties atop the newspaper dispenser, zig and zag, and fall into the capital B bookstore, the last frontier, where in the stacks, Martin Buber waits on me. I and thou are about to take our leave when an agile clerk piles brand new pressed David Meltzer hardcovers next to the register. Warm in my hands, 2 sages later, I am half a day's wages down Broadway, where the paying gig's watchful hour waits. I'm going to read one poem that I'm actually working on right now. I think it's done. Let me know. It's short. It's called Our New Bed. Our new bed is a mattress stuffed with shredded mail. We live beside an ocean of failed memory that faithfully transcribes everything. Sleep swims in place, never closes the distance to light on the shore. So we drift, chew marigolds, eat the end of a solar system, stop the letters, float our heads in the dark. What blossoms bleeds because it can, taste time sighing in the ink of first causes. All those ground up letters began with dear and pointed or posted from ancient cities where they still treasure what is handwritten over the sincerity of technology.
That works.
Thanks. um, as Dan mentioned, there's a lot of cartography terms, and there's a lot of the sort of aesthetics of geography in this poem, in this collection. And so there's a series of poems in here that are called latitude, longitude, degrees, minutes, and seconds. And right now, I'm going to read seconds and check how much time I have. Seconds. A poem you met in an abandoned orchard. A poem that does the dishes. A poem read too deeply for clues, which the poem realizes at Thanksgiving dinner when served a plate of burnt yams and turkey gristle by its glaring in-laws. A poem whose receptionist puts you on hold. A poem in opposing mirrors reading itself endlessly. A poem at the border with a big-ass sign that says, Bienvenidos. A poem that offered directions to Julio Cortázar when he was lost in San Francisco. A poem for fascists in their collective crushing hell. A poem in an old notebook that sings beyond anyone's powers, but that's your handwriting. A poem returned soldiers share like campfire, warding off the dark odyssey, sometimes called home. Maybe some of you have done this, but this poem is called Today I Deleted My News Feed. Today I deleted my news feed so that in at least one future, they will know what measures I took for sanity and solitude by killing this constant technology before it does me. To which they will say, but was it technology or sorcery? Their antiquarian dictionaries will serve only questions in the form of definitions. Did the news feed him? Did the words nourish him? And if so, why would he delete his sustenance? He was probably a saint or a heretic. Now we know they've been reduced to synonyms. Every rock and roll song said so. Perhaps he was fasting. Nope, nope. Let us speak plainly. She wished to eradicate the endless stream of events. Staying current, after all, was the cancer of her age. She realized staying current was, in fact, a kind of antonym for being present. And besides, she was ahead of her time. So one day, she deleted her newsfeed, saw thunderheads through the screen door, and followed them into the foothills. Suddenly, it was the most important thing to do. There were no synonyms in the way, only the free gait of loose-limbed walking down a street beyond the city limits to a path spiraling up and up to the waterfalls and maidenhair drinking from the cascade mist. She most certainly removed her clothes because archaeologists found them folded and fossilized neatly beside her in the dry mineral sink, and the etched fern prints pressed like memory unto stone, if we make certain assumptions about what we've read. This poem is called Latitude. A poem on a silent page in an empty house. A poem with an entourage. A poem that insults the interviewer and they have to cut to commercial break. A well-dressed poem. A disgruntled, alienating poem that says, "Not my problem, Buttercup. Buy a dictionary." A poem that lives with its mother. A poem revealing that every poem relies on its mother even after it learns to fly. A poem hanging in a pawn shop window. A poem that secretly loves disco. A poem that has held many jobs. A poem for right after, and you're both still winded, sharing a Marlboro. A poem you cross the street to avoid because it tends to blather and you're already late. A poem in a tiff with its PR man. "You're not hearing me, Sal. I want to be un-Googleable." A poem you hear for the first time over the phone. A poem for rebuilding after the fire. A poem with Spike Lee camera angles. A poem announcing the death of literature, followed by an unapologetic sequel. A poem that once shared a cab with Wisława Szymborska. A poem that is not sufficiently pathological to run for Congress. A bearded poem in Giverny. A poem that gives you her entire record collection again and again and again. Then I read Wisława Szymborska. Her name, a melody foreign only to my lack of yet another mother tongue. And her first poem aloud, it's enough music to awaken all of Paris in her Polish, Englished before my eyes. I flip the book, look at the price in euros and commas, 22,00. I like how they use the comma instead of the decimal point over here, but it seems like 22,00 should have more digits in more places. Or a treasury, a life's work I find freshly minted, leaning in the shelves of Shakespeare and Company, waiting like a blind date gone right for once, where I am glad to pay, where beyond the typewriter alcove, I find the silent piano room, where with you I must say I feel only free. So I'll close it out with this. This is the last part of All Tomorrow's Train Rides. And so I read a little bit from the first part, a little bit from the last part. And if you like what you hear, you can pick up a copy and see what the stops in between are like. So here we go. How did it happen, Sancho? Juan Diego, the campesino from Bayshore? His image has multiplied in freshly lit novenas lining the tracks. No estoy aquí yo, que soy tu madre. A tunneling of candles remembers, another death on the rails, another descanso for the weary. I think to say to an empty car, brilliant with 10,000 lights, riding in silence, past wreaths and crosses hung on the suicide fence. Nearing 22nd Street, dunes of scrap metal spread to the bay's edge. a taxonomy for what remains, windowless car doors, drain pipes jutting like dirty telescopes toward every direction of the coming night. One stack just for brass, enough to forge a symphony of trumpets, a silent fanfare for jagged wrecks towed from intersections and heaped to irrelevance. I-beams and miles of alloy, a city's incremental raising. Dusk teeters on potential. You can taste the rust. Amid the lonely work of scrapyard comparison, everything stacked by likeness speaks of its only possible order, placed by man, ruined in time, but does not clarify the nature of junk. The conductor has called his last bullet to pensionhood, where southbound souls are just underway. In the wake of our train, their future. In the wake of their train, our future. Interdependent journeys, so unlike the timetables, the calendars, bowstrings of sun gods pulling back the days before letting fly another solstice where windows offer warped years in the glass, and the final slowing into the train yard before home and sleep and seemingly start again. Thank you.
Mute, ladies and gentlemen, and give him a round here, please.
Nice finish.
Great job. I love your work.
Thank you.
Oh, beautiful.
I love all the commuting poems.
And Marilee, she's really like the a poem, you know, poem that's great.
I forgot the name.
But heartfelt comments, wonderful work, very wonderful work.
Thank you.
I enjoyed
Very
all of them,
cool.
including the poems about the poems.
Beautiful.